I'd like to welcome Colin Lyas, who's a retired senior lecturer in philosophy from the University of Lancaster, and I'd like to welcome on behalf of the art movement Intentism. So, hello. I'd like to ask you some questions about the role of intentionism in the arts. First of all, for those who are not aware of the debate about the role of intention and meaning, can you put it in some sort of historical context? For example, can you give an outline of the philosophical background of the debate, say Beazley, Wimsatt, Barth, Derrida, etc.?
Yeah. It's probably best to go all the way back to where what might be called the attack on the author originated. The earliest I can find is a Sicilian novel called La Malvolio by a man called Vega, I think, where he says it's the duty of the author to absent himself from the work. But the thing really takes off as a result, I'm almost certain, of the First World War. And I'm almost certain that it's the Battle of the Somme which did it, where mechanised warfare eliminated everybody. And what you find sweeping through the whole of culture at that time is the question, what in our culture caused this to happen? And there was an analysis of the pre-First World War culture, and they would say things like, well, it was the autocratic culture. God laid down the law to creation. The father laid down the law to the family. The boss laid down the law. Right? The king or the Kaiser laid down the law, and people passively followed. What we have to do then is to sweep all that away. And we've got to as it were, dislocate culture. In the arts, I think by the way, in psychology, you've got people saying that here is the id repressed by the ego. So it even repeated itself in individual psychology. The art theory contributed by saying, and the author was the god over the work. And so in order to displace the whole of culture, we've got to displace the author somehow from the work. And it shows itself right away. I mean, the Duchamp and Fontaine has a false signature. You know, who gives a damn who did it? Mm-hmm. You know? And it's very interesting also that one's called Fontaine, because it's almost an ironic comment on the fountains of Versailles, which were part of the culture which produced all this. You know, these kinds of jokes go on. So what you get around that time is this kind of feeling that we've got to get rid of authority figures, and in the arts no less than in culture generally. And this led, I think, to the attack on the author. And it's sometimes explicit. In Sartre, Sartre launches that attack on the author as God. And it was Mauriac, I think, he was attacking. He said, the time has come to say that the author is not God. You know? And so that was the psychological motivation behind it. At the same time, there were things happening in linguistics, particularly with Saussure. The notion that meaning was not bequeathed by individual acts of will, but meaning was bequeathed by the structures of the language which existed independently of any of us. They were there before, obviously they were there before we were born, they will be there after we die. So that words get their meaning not from individual acts of will, but from a structure which lives outside the author. There's a very interesting little twist on this, that if you wanted to know the view that Saussure's influence undermined, you find it in Alice in Wonderland, where there is a wonderful discussion between Humpty Dumpty and Alice. And Humpty Dumpty says, Alice says, I don't think that word means that. And Humpty Dumpty says, when I use a word, it means just what I say it means. You know? Mm-hmm. And that's it. Mm-hmm. I determine the meaning of my language. And I think it begun to be realised you couldn't do that, because you'd have to use words to explain your meaning, and where did they get their meanings from? So gradually this builds up and up and up. So there was the linguistic influence, which eventually leads to structuralist analyses which get rid of the author. There was the psychological impact of the First World War, which gets rid of the authority figure. And then there was one other thing which is peculiar, I think, to the philosophy which led to Beardsley particularly. There was the a sort of attack on Cartesian dualism. Right. In Cartesian dualism you get the mind and the body, right? And somehow or other there's the body objectively in the world, there's the mind subjectively behind. And you get people like Skinner saying there's no such thing, there's just the physical there. And I think Beardsley shows real evidence that intention would just be something in the private psychological mind, whereas what we want is what's there out in the public and objective. We want objective criticism, so we can't be dealing with the fugitive mind of the author. So let's get it out there. And those three come together in an extremely powerful force, which leads to this sweeping abolition of the author. And it goes on, of course. The greatest step of all is the one I think Derrida makes, where he says, well, there isn't any mind that you can focus on as the individual psychological entity anyway. It's all dispersed in the culture. Right. So there's nothing there that you can appeal to.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. And that's it. And that's the historical background.
Thank you.
Very powerful. And the one thing I always used to say to my students, don't undermine the moral and intellectual force behind all that. I mean, after the First World War, I used to say to the students at Lancaster, on the first day of the Somme, the equivalent of the population of this city vanished. Yeah? And people really had a moral force behind it, quite apart from the intellectual one. You're taking on really serious things if you take these people on.
Sure.